The 50-30-20 rule was built for your parents' world, not yours. We are living in a reality where the average tenant in the UK is spending 41% of their take-home pay just on rent. That is before they buy a single loaf of bread, pay an electric bill, or put gas in the car. In the US, over 21 million households are spending more than a third of their income on housing alone. Trying to force your life into a 50% needs cap in 2026 is like trying to wear the jeans you wore in high school. It is uncomfortable, it does not fit, and frankly, it is just making you feel bad about yourself for no reason. If you have ever sat down with a spreadsheet, typed in your net income, and realized that your fixed costs simply will not fit into that neat little 50% box, you are not bad at math. You are just living through an inflation cycle that old textbooks did not account for. Since 2019, consumer prices are up nearly 30%. That is a massive structural shift. When the price of existence goes up, the percentage of your income required to exist has to go up too. Today, I'm going to walk you through why we need to retire the 50-30-20 rule for now and replace it with a split that is actually honest. The 75-10-15. This is not about giving up on saving. It is about resizing your expectations so you can actually stick to a plan. We are going to look at the hard data on rent burdens in high-cost cities like Miami, New York, and London. We are going to look at why a 10% fun budget is actually healthier than a 30% wants budget. And we are going to build a system where you stop gaslighting yourself into thinking you can cut your rent by sheer willpower. If you appreciate financial talk that lives in reality and not in a theoretical vacuum, do me a favor and like the video. It helps the algorithm find other people who are tired of outdated advice. Let's start by looking at what we are leaving behind. The 50-30-20 rule is a classic for a reason. Senator Elizabeth Warren popularized it years ago, and the premise is elegant. You take your after-tax income and split it three ways. 50% goes to needs. That is, your housing, utilities, groceries, and minimum debt payments. 30% goes to wants. That is, your dining out, your Netflix, your travel, the fun stuff. And 20% goes to savings and debt repayment. In a balanced economy with moderate housing costs, this is a beautiful ratio. It creates a massive buffer for your future and plenty of room for fun. But let's run the math on that 50% bucket today. Let's say you take home €3,000 or dollars a month. Under the classic rule, your absolute hard limit for all necessities is $1,500. Now, if you are in Berlin, London, or New York, finding an apartment, paying for heat, electricity, internet, insurance, and feeding yourself for under $1,500 is becoming a statistical anomaly. Recent data shows that in places like Miami or New York City, the typical rent-to-income ratio is pushing 37% or 38%. That is just rent. Once you add in a subway pass, a phone bill, and groceries that cost 29% more than they did 5 years ago, that 50% ceiling is shattered before you even wake up in the morning. Here is the trap. When you try to apply a 2005 rule to a 2026 reality, you end up feeling like a failure. You look at your budget and see your needs are at 65%, and the calculator tells you that you are doing it wrong. Experts call this financial gaslighting. You are being told that your structural fixed costs are a personal discipline problem. Reddit forums are full of people asking how to get their needs down to 50%, and the only answers are usually move to the middle of nowhere or make double the money. Those are not budgeting tips, those are life overhauls. We need a budget for the life you have right now. The macro backdrop has shifted, and your budget has to shift with it. Allianz Trade found that headline consumer prices in early 2026 were nearly 30% higher than in 2019. For low-income households, the effective inflation is even worse because they spend more of their money on the things that got expensive: food and energy. European Central Bank data shows that over 20% of households now expect to miss a utility or rent payment. When 1 in 5 people are worried about keeping the lights on, telling them to limit needs to half their income is not just unhelpful, it is mathematically impossible. You might be thinking, well, I will just move. I will just find a cheaper place. But here is the thing that makes 2026 different from 2016. The spread of high rent isn't contained to just the city centres anymore. And moving costs money. If you break your lease to save $200 a month, but it costs you $4,000 to move, you are in the hole for 2 years. This is the rent trap. You are stuck paying too much because you cannot afford to leave. So, if we can't move, we have to change the math we use to survive. So, let's introduce the update. It is called the 75-10-15 rule. It is a modification of a strategy discussed by investment apps like Stash and financial groups like Thrivent. Here is the breakdown. 75% of your take-home pay goes to needs, 10% goes to wants or fun, and 15% goes to your future. That includes savings, investments, and extra debt payments. This flip is significant. We are acknowledging that for many people, especially parents or city dwellers, essentials consuming 3/4 of your income is not a sign of failure. It is just the current cost of doing business. Let's look at that 75% needs bucket. This is the radical honesty part of the plan. This bucket includes your rent or mortgage, utilities, internet, phone, insurance, groceries, car payments, gas, and minimum payments on credit cards or loans. It also includes childcare, which, for many families, is essentially a second rent payment. By expanding this from 50% to 75%, we stop pretending these costs are negotiable in the short term. If you make $4,000 a month, this gives you $3,000 for survival. That is a number that actually aligns with the rental market in most major cities. Now, here is the trade-off. To make this work, the wants bucket has to shrink. In the old rule, you had 30% for lifestyle. In this new reality, we cut that to 10%. I know, that sounds harsh. But here is the secret. 30% for wants often leads to lifestyle creep. It is just enough money to get used to buying unnecessary things without really valuing them. When you restrict fun to 10%, every dollar you spend on entertainment becomes intentional. This is your guilt-free dopamine money. You have less of it, but you enjoy it more because it is fully protected. Then we have the 15% for the future. This is the one number we try not to touch. Even if your rent is high, we fight to keep this at 15%. This bucket is for your retirement accounts, your emergency fund, or attacking high-interest debt above the minimums. Why 15%? Because financial planners generally agree that saving 15% of your income throughout your career is the baseline for a secure retirement. Even if we have to squeeze our lifestyle today, we do not want to rob our future selves. If you can't hit 15% yet, that is your target. But 75-10-15 is the structure that keeps you safe. Let's put this into a real-world scenario so you can see the difference. Let's take our friend in Berlin or Chicago with a net income of $3,000. Under the old 50-30-20 rule, they are allowed $1,500 for needs. They find an apartment for $1,200. That leaves them $300 for all bills, food, and transport. It is impossible. They fail immediately. They end up dipping into their savings bucket just to buy groceries, so they save nothing. They feel guilty, they stop tracking, and their finances drift. This is how the 50-30-20 rule actually discourages saving in high-cost environments. Now apply the 75-10-15 to that same person. They have $3,000 coming in. Their needs cap is now $2,250. They pay that $1,200 rent. They now have $1,050 left for utilities, food, and transport. That is tight, but it is doable. They can breathe. They have $300 allocated for fun. That is, a few dinners out and some streaming services. And most importantly, they automatically route $450, that is, their 15%, into investments or savings. By acknowledging the higher fixed costs, they actually manage to save $450 a month. Under the old rule, they likely would have saved zero because they would have given up on the budget entirely. I want to pause here because there is a massive misconception I see in the comments all the time. People say, "Tom, if I can only save 15%, I'll never get rich." And they are right, you might not get rich quick. But if you try to save 20%, fail, and end up saving nothing, you are guaranteed to be poor. The difference between saving 15% consistently and aiming for 20% but saving 0% is millions of dollars over a lifetime. The best budget is the one you actually stick to, not the one that looks good on Instagram. Let's talk about the psychology of the wants bucket. In the 75-10-15 model, that 10% is sacred. It is guilt-free. When you are squeezing your needs into 50%, you often feel guilty about buying a latte because you know you are already over budget on rent. In the 75-10-15, if you have allocated $300 for fun, you spend it with zero guilt. Research on budgeting shows that deprivation resilience is a real thing. If you restrict yourself too much, you eventually snap and binge spend. By protecting that 10%, you prevent the binge. You are planning your dopamine hits. The danger of the old 30% wants bucket was that it was too vague. It became a catch-all for lifestyle creep. You get a raise, you buy a slightly nicer car, you upgrade your phone plan, and suddenly that 30% is gone. With only 10% for wants, you have to be ruthless. Do you want the expensive gym membership or the Friday night dinners? You probably can't have both. This constraint forces you to identify what you actually value. It turns mindless spending into mindful spending. And in an inflationary environment, mindfulness is your best defense. The 15% bucket serves another purpose. It keeps the muscle memory of saving alive. When prices spike, the first thing people usually cut is their 401k contribution or their automated transfer to savings. They say, "I'll start saving again when prices come down." But prices rarely come down. They just go up slower. If you cut your savings to zero now, you might wake up in 5 years having saved nothing. By locking in 15%, even if it feels painful, you ensure that you are still paying yourself first. You are treating your future self as a bill that must be paid, just like the electric company. This method also scales well for families. If you have kids in daycare, you know that daycare is a need, but it acts like a luxury car payment. 50-30-20 breaks immediately when childcare enters the chat. 75-10-15 absorbs it. Thrivent points out that this method is specifically useful for households with growing expenses. It allows you to survive the expensive years, the years with diapers and daycare, without completely abandoning your financial future. You are accepting a season of higher costs without declaring bankruptcy on your retirement goals. There is a flip side to this. Some of you are high earners. You make good money, but you live in a city so expensive that you still feel broke. You might think this rule is only for people struggling. Incorrect. I know people making 6 figures who live paycheck to paycheck because they are trying to maintain a 30% wants lifestyle in a 75% needs city. This rule is a reality check for high earners too. If your rent is $4,000, you don't get to have the 30% fun budget. The math applies to everyone. So, how do you actually implement this? Step 1 is getting your number right. We're talking about net income, what hits your bank account. But I want you to be careful here. If your employer deducts health insurance or retirement contributions automatically, add those retirement contributions back in for a second. We want to see the whole picture. Your 15% savings target can include the match you get at work. So if you put in 5% and your boss puts in 5%, you are already at 10%. You only need to find another 5% from your take-home pay. That makes the 15% target much less intimidating. Step 2 is the audit. Go through your last 3 months of bank statements. Group everything into the 3 buckets: needs, wants, future. Be honest. Netflix is a want. Internet is a need. Uber Eats is a want. Groceries are a need. If your needs are currently sitting at 85%, you have work to do. 75, 10, 15 is a more forgiving rule, but it is still a rule. If you are at 85% needs, you are in the danger zone. This is where you have to look at the big levers: housing, car payments, and insurance. You cannot latte cut your way out of an 85% structural problem. Step 3 is the squeeze. If your needs are high, your wants must pay the price. This is the part nobody likes to hear. If your rent takes up 45% of your income, you do not get to have a 20% fund budget. You have to shrink that circle. Maybe you cancel the gym and run outside. Maybe you cook at home 5 nights a week instead of 2. The 75, 10, 15 rule gives you permission to spend more on rent, but it demands you spend less on lifestyle. It is a balanced equation. You cannot have high fixed costs and high variable spending. That is the definition of going broke. Step 4 is automation. The only way 75, 10, 15 works is if the 15% happens automatically. Set up a transfer for the day after payday. Move that 15%, or whatever portion isn't already coming out of your paycheck, to a separate account. If you wait until the end of the month to save what is left over, you will save 0. Parkinson's law states that work expands to fill the time available. Well, spending expands to fill the money available. Remove the savings first, then pay your rent. Then, and only then, see what is left for the 10% fun bucket. Now, does this mean 50, 30, 20 is dead forever? No. It is still a fantastic North Star. If you live in a lower cost of living area, or if you have paid off your debt, or if you get a significant promotion, you should absolutely try to migrate back toward 50, 30, 20. The 50, 30, 20 rule is a wealth building accelerator. If you can keep your needs to 50% and save 20%, you will reach financial independence much faster. But we have to treat it as a destination, not a starting line. For 2026, for most people, it is an aspiration, not a requirement. I also want to address those of you on minimum wage or entry-level salaries. I read the Reddit threads. I know that for some of you, needs are 95% or 100% of your income. In that case, 75, 10, 15 is also just a theory. If you are in survival mode, your only goal is needs 100%, debt 0%. Forget the percentages. Focus on income generation and survival. Do not feel guilty because you can't hit a 15% savings rate when you are trying to buy groceries. Rules are tools for optimization. They are not judgments on your character. One specific note on debt. Where does it go? Minimum payments, the amount you must pay to avoid default, go in the 75% needs bucket. They are non-negotiable obligations. Extra payments, the money you use to attack the principal and get out of debt faster, go in the 15% future bucket. This distinction is crucial. It shows you that your past choices, debt, are increasing your current needs and reducing your flexibility. The goal of the 15% bucket is to eventually eliminate those debt payments so they stop clogging up your 75% bucket. Finally, remember that personal finance is personal. If you value living in the centre of London or Manhattan, you are trading your wants money for location money. Your apartment is your entertainment. That is a valid choice, as long as you recognise it. You can't live in the most expensive zip code and eat at the most expensive restaurants and save for retirement, unless you have a top 1% income. 75-10-15 forces you to admit that the apartment is the luxury. If you are okay with that trade, then the budget works. Let's bring this all home. The world has changed. Rents are up, groceries are up, and the old 50-30-20 rule has become a source of anxiety rather than a tool for help. By shifting to 75-10-15, you are not failing, you are adapting. You are acknowledging that needs now take up 3/4 of the average paycheck. You are protecting a smaller 10% slice of fun to keep yourself sane. And you are defending a 15% savings rate to ensure you don't work until you are 90. It is a plan for the economy we have, not the one we wish we had. My challenge to you this week is simple. Don't download a complicated app. Just grab a piece of paper. Write down your net income. Multiply it by 0.75. That is your number. Look at your rent and bills. Do they fit? If yes, great. If no, look at the 10% wants bucket and start cutting. And if you are one of the people who has made this switch, let me know in the comments. What is your real needs percentage right now? Is it 60? 70? 80? I want to see the real data from real people, not just what the textbooks say. In 2005, 50-30-20 was a revelation. In 2026, it is a suggestion. Your landlord doesn't read personal finance blogs, and your grocery store doesn't care about ratios. If your reality is 75-10-15, own it, name it, and make sure that 15% to future you never drops to zero. That is how you win in a high inflation world. You don't win by being perfect, you win by being persistent. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.